that come into Beck. So this isn't increase on caseload, this is increases or decreases in the number of people making applications. And this one we tend to look at each week because this is the one that shows the number of council tax reduction assessments or calculations that are being done prior to being passed over for submission. So that's there. The numbers that are submitted, those numbers look quite interesting at the moment. They are pretty much holding steady, though that line is quite jagged. It is still a pretty average number that are coming through, and they still seem to be slightly on the rise at the moment. So so if you want to have a look at those stats, they are in your slide pack. And at this point, I will hand over to Kevin. But before I do so, there was a question. Does any of the panel know about track and trace and whether it's going to be extended or not?
Not definitely, but I must admit I did think it was going to be extended.
I would say I don't know for certain, but the government aren't exactly coming forward to put extra funding in. So whether or not they extend it, I don't know. But funding, there's no additional funding coming through.
No, it does seem to so there's a bit of a dispute between Treasury and Downing Street on this at the moment, doesn't there? Insofar as Treasury doesn't particularly want to push things forward, but and incur more cost, but for some reason the government do want it to go forward. Otherwise, there is that dichotomy, isn't it, of getting people to self-isolate if there is no payments around for them to do so.
Yes.
But,
so go on.
Well, there is quite a lot in the news, obviously, isn't there, at the moment, about not self-isolating at all, particularly if you've had both your jabs, that eventually you may not have to self-isolate. So I think it's yet another unknown.
Yeah, we won't find out until probably the last minute or even a couple of days after the last minute. Okay, Kevin, do you want to tell us about business rates?
Right, I'll deal with business grants first. Obviously, we all heard last week's announcement in respect to the roadmap to the 19th of July. Ministers have said there's no more money for grants. Local authorities have got plenty of it. In respect of restart grants, the end date is still, the closure date is still the 30th of June, and BIS haven't indicated that's going to be extended despite last week's announcement. So obviously there was a national campaign started the week before last, and I think they're doing some more publicity as well in respect of that. In respect of additional restrictions grant, the date you can apply for your top-up has been extended from the 30th of June to the 30th of July. You are encouraged to help those businesses with the updated guidance that are affected by the 19th of July date. Having said that, those authorities that have spent the ARG, and my authority is one of those that have received the top-up and is spending it and is unlikely to be able to extend it to the 19th of July, won't be able to help those businesses for that extension because we just haven't got the money left. And once again, the government aren't looking to pump any money in. Likewise, the expanded retail discount and the nursery discount for England is still 100% only until the 30th of June. That is not getting extended. It will be 66% subject to a cash cap from the 1st of July. Obviously, there's ongoing pressure on reconciliations on the grants. I know a number of authorities received emails on Friday in respect to that and ongoing wise. So it's not just about the payment of grants, it's about the administration that's going to be here for a number of years to come. Happy to take any questions, Malcolm, but it's not gone away just yet. And despite the announcements of plenty of money being around, still within local authorities, some authorities have spent it all. So there isn't any. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. I mean, as always, this seems to be a tale of two halves, isn't it? Those that have got money to spare and those that have spent all their money. Is the government likely to try and take money off those that have got spare money and give it to those that don't have enough money? Do you think that's likely?
I don't know what the outcome is. I think there's a lot of unknowns still, and they're waiting to see what the complaints are. At the moment, we're not allowed to take from one grant to another grant and spend it in this grant or take it from, and there's no indication the government will allow us to do that. But what the picture will be next week, you'll know as good as me, Malcolm.
Do you think that, as they start to publish the league tables, that will have an effect on how they may want to redistribute the grant money?
Whether they publish the league tables or not, it depends. I think it depends on the pressure of the backbench MPs and also business that is affected by this. And one of those businesses is the events industry. It depends how good their lobbying is of government, in my view. I don't think it's about the publishing of league tables. I think it's the lobbying of central government, which will make a difference to whether or not the system changes.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Kevin. Nick, do we have any questions?
No, nothing coming up just yet.
Okay, fine. Right. Okay. So I've got two subjects that are kind of linked together for us to chat about this week. I'm going to start off with house prices. So the Rightmove published its figures this week, and generally was showing that the average price of properties coming to market rose by about 8% month on month. So far, they're registering an average price now of £336,073. The ONS data is showing 256,000, but both of them are showing that there are strong price increases across the four nations in the UK. It's a measurement really of the average UK house prices. They dipped a little in April, but it was still 20,000 higher than it was in April last year. Rightmove are saying that we're starting to see a slowing in the pace of house sales, but it's still pretty vigorous, and rural prices in England and Wales are rising twice as fast as in the cities. So does that give us a kind of indication around things like affordable housing? Is housing just becoming unaffordable? I know this is something you're particularly interested in, Liz.
Yeah, well, I think certainly in the southeast, it is the case that if you think that rural house prices are going up, well, there's quite a lot of the southeast that is still rural. And yes, I think it's a danger. But what I think is more dangerous is potentially inflation and mortgage rates going up. And I say that in respect of rental properties, where I imagine that if we go to the small landlord who has bought a property or has a property on a right to rent mortgage, or indeed an interest-only mortgage, interest rates go up. That will lead to, I think, inevitable rise in rent.
And yeah, I mean, that's quite interesting because the private rental figures at the moment show that the private rentals grew in the last 12 months, 1.1% in England, 1.5 in Wales and 1.3 in Scotland. And the East Midlands saw the highest annual growth. They saw a rise of 2.4% in the East Midlands, whereas London had the lowest, a negative of 0.1. Kevin, is this turning into be a problem for your area? Are you seeing growth or negativity?
We are seeing growth. We're one of the 41 authorities that had a surplus on a collection fund, and of course we've got the Northern Arc, so we're seeing a lot of growth in both private rental and purchase.
So both rental and purchase.
Yes.
So I just could say, Malcolm, Chris has suggested, has the shift to working from home changed the housing market ball game at all, potentially?
Yeah, certainly. Yes, Chris. I mean, certainly there's almost a uniform view across those people who specialise in housing that it's a combination of things. Certainly, working from home has seen people moving out further into the rural communities and looking for bigger housing, which is driving up the cost. I live in Wetherby, which is just outside of Leeds, for those of you who don't know it. And the price of property in Wetherby has gone up considerably. And at the same time, we're seeing a loss of rented accommodation and affordable housing in Wetherby. That's being pushed into other areas within Leeds.
Malcolm, Michelle suggested that in the Midlands, the privately rented average for a 3-bed house has gone from 600 to around £1,000.
Yeah, you see that really doesn't surprise me, because the Midlands is really one of the big growth areas at the moment. I mean, it's quite interesting, that dichotomy between the south and the north. We are seeing this in terms of the price of property that's starting to merge during the pandemic for that very reason. And the Midlands is well placed, and good communication links for both the east and the west, close to London and equally close to Birmingham and Manchester as well. I don't think that HS2 has much bearing. Liz, what's your views on this?
What, HS2?
Well, no, not HS2, because we'll be here forever.
Yeah.
But in terms of the house prices, I know you've been having a bit of a peek around the Midlands as well, looking at what's happening there.
Well, I think the whole thing is so difficult. I mean, we know we have a housing crisis. There are not enough affordable properties for rent. There are, in the southeast, there are probably not enough affordable properties to buy. People are completely extended. That's the other worrying thing. I mean, in years gone by, when interest rates moved up, actually, probably your ratio of debt was not probably it wasn't as large as it is now. I mean, most people are saddled with a debt of at least 200,000 in the southeast if they've bought their property. Now, I just think that there is a huge risk that things will go horribly, horribly wrong, as they did in whenever it was that the exchange rate took over. I can't remember now, but you know what I'm talking about.
1980s,
When mortgage rates were around, 15, 20%. Well, okay, that's not likely to happen. But when you think of the level of debt that was around then, it was nothing like the level of debt that people have taken on to get on this all sacred housing ladder.
And does that apply equally to mortgages and to rent as well? Aren't people also having to cough up far more money to get into the rented market as well now?
Well, yes. Again, as I said earlier, the fact that if interest rates go up, that will inevitably lead, I think, to increase in rents. Will it ever get to the point where nobody can afford to rent, so it dries up? I don't think so. But we know that LHA is not going to keep pace with any rent rises, not even on an annual basis.
And Kevin, is the potential in all of this that if this bubble bursts, particularly if it bursts through an inflationary leap, that's going to impact on local authorities, both in terms of the demand for housing and the demand for financial support, but also in terms of council tax collection dropping as well, will it?
Well, obviously, the more money you've got to collect, the harder it is to collect it, particularly in view of all the unknowns of job furlough, what's going to happen, what's the future, what's the impact of COVID. So it's not just the rising costs, it's also about the rising debts and the less money coming in. And the other thing from that is a lot of the income for authorities comes from business rates and business rates retention. If that's impacted as well, we've got to find our money from somewhere.
Malcolm,
Yes.
up in Copeland, apparently there's not been much of an increase so far, but they are seeing increase in the charges for specified accommodation.
Yeah, you see, that's of course, is one of the problems, isn't it? Because it's being hidden. That kind of problem is being hidden, and it's also it's shifting. I don't feel that the DWP has got to grips with this at all, have they? Liz, do you think?
No.
But we could have been having this conversation 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. We would be saying the same thing, wouldn't we?
I think indeed we would.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this kind of leads us into the
Malcolm's a hand up here.
Is there? Right. Okay.
Yes. Lynn, sorry to take over, but I don't want to miss her chance. It's Lynn McMorris.
Thanks, Liz.
Right, okay,
I know it happens to me so often.
No, I was just going to say that, I mean, specified accommodation, I mean, it's just been a bone of contention for 20 odd years, and nothing ever seems to be resolved about it. And there's so many people that take advantage, the landlords take advantage of becoming, supported accommodation or whatever else, and they just feel that they can put their rents up to whatever level. I mean, all the time I was in benefits, 20 odd years, it never got resolved. Never.
No, you're right, Lynn. And I remember doing a session like this back in probably about 2012 with the DWP, and them saying they were going to do something about it then. And I was rather scornful and said, "You haven't done anything about it so far, so why would we believe you're going to do anything about it in the immediate future?" And here we are, 8 years later, 9 years later, and it still doesn't seem to be resolved. Do you think we will ever resolve this question, or is it just going to drag on forever?
I think it will just drag on, like you say, 20 odd years, really trying to deal with it. My authority that I was with at the time as benefits manager, we were involved in a project in 2010 about supported accommodation, because we had a lot of mental health institutions in the town, and of course once care in the community came along, so it's been going on for that long, Malcolm.
Yeah, it has. I tend to be of the view that actually it is something that the DWP should give up to the local authorities to come up with a proposal on how it should be dealt with, rather than trying to control it centrally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Malcolm, Naomi's making a point that the DWP do not seem to grasp that any increase in S&E claims doesn't only cost the LAs, but also cost the DWP significant sums, especially at a time when they're expecting HB to reduce.
Yeah. Is that Naomi Armstrong, by any chance?
Yes, it is. I've managed to get on eventually.
Hi, Naomi. Pleased
Hello.
to hear from you.
Yeah. Supported and exempt. Oh, my days. Oh, my days. We had a survey to complete in the last sort of week, 10 days. And it was just very depressing to go through the same questions with the same outcomes, and nothing seems to have changed. Well, Lynn, you were saying 2010 you were doing a project. We've been doing projects with DWP and MHCLG since then, and nothing seems to change. I think DWP have not grasped that an increase in settings will cost them dearly. They're going to have to fork out up to the rent officer referral, and more than likely 60% of everything above that. And that's millions and millions at a time that they were anticipating the spend for HB going down, and at a time we were anticipating a reduction in our caseload. But since the introduction of universal credit, we've seen our supported and exempt go from 450 to 718 claims.
Mad.
Yeah.
Mental.
What I think is a little worrying, unless I've got this wrong, it seems to me that it is far easier now to set up as a private company, providing, because you can register, I can't remember what the term is, but it seems much easier for people to set up in the sphere of providing this sort of accommodation than it was 10 years ago. And also, isn't there I'm sure somewhere along the line there are some pilots going on in relation to exempt accommodation, but I don't know anything about them. Does anybody else?
Yeah, it is, but it's more looking at the standard of provision of care and whether that is provided at a reasonable cost. So, you know,
Well,
they're not
indeed,
going
if in
to,
some cases, if it's provided at all, I'm sorry to say.
quite possible. But the problem for us is that there doesn't seem to be much of a move to up the rent officer referral figures and deal with the punitive nature for district councils on anything above the rent officer referral. Let's face it, provision of social care is not a district council's requirement, but
No.
we are essentially backfilling for something that we shouldn't have to pay for.
But you make an interesting point there, don't you? Because it's not a district council facility, but a number of people who are on today work for single tier authorities where it is a provision for them. Is it operating? You know, does anybody, you know, say at a single tier authority, does it work differently when you're a single tier authority?
It's easier.
Yeah, because I mean, you've worked for a number of single tier authorities, haven't you, Liz?
Yeah, but I mean, really, I think it does exactly as Naomi and Lynn are saying. It, regardless of, I take the point entirely that district councils are not responsible for social care. Presumably, that cost should move to the county. I'm right in thinking that because I don't think I've ever worked for a district council, at least not for a very long time. So those costs move to the county. But isn't it all? It's all wrapped up in this sort of plethora of difficulties around social care. Yes. Nobody wants to take responsibility for the elements of anything to do with provision that is social care.
Yeah, and if memory serves me correctly, I think there is part of the determining who pays for the support is determined on whether social services has actually paid for any of this housing support themselves in the past. And if they have, then I think in terms of the provision, they're supposed to continue to do so. But I don't think that happens in practice at all. If they can offload it to the district councils or to the benefit service, then they tend to do that, and they're not particularly challenged on it.
I suppose in single tier authorities, though, by and large, it all comes out of the same pot, doesn't it?
Yeah, fair point.
You know.
Yeah.
Malcolm, do you want to? Rosemary wants to come in. Her mic's open. Do you want to come in, Rosemary?
Let's bring Rosemary in.
Yeah, it was just to say, you know, we're a district council and we have no input whatsoever from the county council. So they just put whoever they want in, wherever they want. And this is the case with these really high ones. They're just, you know, they've got complex needs and I can see that. But it's just ridiculous, the amounts that they're charging. And there's not a lot we can do about it because, you know, they're so vulnerable.
Which area do you work for?
The Copeland, Cumbria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if I dare say this, I mean, Cumbria is not the most communicative of county councils either, in general terms, is it?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
No. And the issue that we've got at the moment is that we're being pressured by quite a number of providers to give details up front whether we'll pay or not. And it seems to be that they're in a lot of liaison with the county council. And it's like, no, sorry, but we're not going to give you that information. We're not going to tell you. put a claim in and we'll make a determination.
Yeah, I mean, there's always been pressure to find out, how far they can push the price up.
I think sometimes what worries me is that people or providers who ask you those sort of questions, well, how much will you pay, basically, seem to me to be frighteningly just as much in the dark about how they're financing their operation than anything else.
Yeah.
And I think that's because it's terrifying, really.
It
I mean,
is.
if they were looking at providing care first, which I imagine some are, some quite clearly are not, actually they'd know what care they wanted to provide and it would have been costed out. So why on earth anybody is coming to a local authority and saying, well, how much are you going to pay?
Well,
It's
isn't
not,
that the same argument around LHA when LHA was introduced?
Well,
You could just go online and see how much you're prepared to pay.
yes.
yeah. I was going to say, we had a provider a few years ago now, but they came to us and they were costing out, wanted to know if we would pay whatever they'd set the rent at. And in the conversation, they went, well, we could always get the county to pay another 1.5 million. And if that would help, well, if you've got another 1.5 million, put it into it and then we'll look at the figures when we've got a claim. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So I see we're coming up to the end of our time. I did have another subject I was going to bring in, but I'm not going to bring that in now. We'll hold it over till next week. This sometimes happens. Sometimes we get through everything. Sometimes we push things back to the following week. Can I thank everybody for their contributions this week? And yes, go on, Liz.
Sorry, I was just going to say that, interestingly, moving to Teams does appear to have supported more debate than we used to have under the webinar.
Yes, it's easier for people to be able to get in and speak. Nick, have we missed anybody at all?
Not really, no. I mean, Michelle mentioned that Birmingham were involved in the pilot before, but I couldn't cram that in at that point in time. So Michelle's mentioned that.
Okay, that's quite interesting. I suppose, would Michelle like to tell us more? Do we think? Would Michelle like to raise her hand and we'll open her line? If she's shy, that's fine as well.
No, she's got her hand up.
Okay, let's bring Michelle in.
Can you unmute to Malcolm?
Oh, let's have a look.
Yeah, I've done it myself.
Right, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Michelle.
Yeah, it's nice to actually be able to join in, because when it was GoToWebinar, I could only listen in after the event, so it's been nice to join you all today. I don't actually work for Birmingham, I work for Dudley, but Birmingham are part of the pilot, and they have sent questionnaires out in the last week to neighbouring authorities to see whether or not the fact that the pilot that they've been undertaking has increased the numbers that surrounding areas have had of supported exempt accommodation claims. Now, we're finding that ours are growing exponentially at the moment. I'm getting new providers contacting me at least weekly, sometimes twice a week, 3 times a week, people that we've never had in the supported accommodation arena before. And it's not just little one-bed properties or a small house. I've had one contact me recently. They want to take over a hotel in Dudley, and that'll have over 100 bed spaces. So I think whatever's happening in Birmingham is pushing their problem out to the surrounding areas. Watch this space, really.
Yeah, and I was wondering about that with Copeland as well, whether somebody else is maybe in a pilot and that's pushing the cases out to Copeland. I know we see similar kind of things here in Leeds when they're, it pushes it out to the outskirts. or to the edges, particularly. I mean, Dudley and Birmingham, it's pretty much a conurbation area, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah, same here as well in the Leeds area. Yeah,
It's the biggest growth area of our work at the moment, supported accommodation.
I think it's going to get worse, to be honest, because I think with everybody working from home over the past sort of 15 months, certainly in my area, which is in Essex, we've had things like our Debenhams has closed down, for example. So we've got a massive place free in the middle of the town. I know a lot of people in London have decided that they don't need to have offices anymore. So the worry is that people will pick up shops and offices and turn them into residential. And it's sort of wide open for the supported accommodation market, like you just said with the hotel.
I think we've got something similar, not in Copeland, but within Cumbria and Barrow. They'd built a load of properties for subcontractors for the BAE that's down there, and they haven't been taken up, so they're converting all those. So they've got, I think there's about one that's got about 64 places that they've just come online with. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's just crazy.
yeah, I mean, you all make very good points. It does seem, again, I mean, we see this in the Leeds area as well. So that Debenhams in Colchester, is that the one, Lynn?
Yeah, it's a massive shop.
I was going to say that's a huge shopping centre of Colchester.
And there doesn't seem to be any drive for new business to go in there, and I think that's the plan, to turn it into residential.
Yeah, that would change the centre of Colchester quite dramatically, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
Yeah, interesting. Right, okay, so we've wandered on another 5 minutes, so I'm going to call it a day now, because I know people have got other meetings and things to go to. Can I thank everybody who's contributed today? Can I thank Nick for his help? Can I thank Naomi and Liz and Kevin, my usual panel, and everyone else who's come in today, Lynn and Michelle, and if I've forgotten anybody,
Rosemary,
that's it, yes.
Malcolm, I think Lynn might have something to add before you go. She's got a hand up in a minute.
Okay, yeah, go on, Lynn.
Sorry, it's where I didn't lower it, Nick.
That was from before.
Right, okay, in which case I shall see you all next week. Thank you very much. We are planning to do another benefits briefing towards the end of next month, not this month, because we're going to wander into the holiday season. But I'll let everybody know when the benefits briefing is on. And just a reminder, if anybody wants to find out what we're doing with Bex, if you're a Bex user, then we're running some things about the roadmap on how that's going to change and what new services we're bringing into it. And on that basis, I will finish off. I'll email out the slide pack to everybody. And thank you all very much, and see you all next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.